Good evening and welcome all. Tonight we're here to share information and then have an actual exchange of concerns, ideas, or questions as they come forward. We are live on television for everyone's information purposes. It's being broadcast across the city. So I'd like to welcome members of the NPU Commission, Madam Chairman, and all your members, and Mr. LaRose, yes, and Mr. Palomino. I believe, Madam Chairman, you have a brief introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I turned this on. All right. I appreciate your invitation for us to come meet with you in this kind of workshop. I very much appreciate our being in this kind of proximity so we can really have a discussion if that should come about. We are here this evening to provide you with information about our future, and that's the future of NPU. There'll be intervening points in it, but I want you to know most of all that the day that we were able to have finalized the settlement agreement with the former general manager, the next day brought us to a workshop for several hours to begin the future. And so that's what we have worked on. This evening we're going to begin with our acting general manager, Chris LaRose, to talk about where we are in our planning and in our actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
All right. First of all, I am very proud of the women and men of NPU and the work we're doing to provide reliable service 24/7 to our community. We have listened very closely to the questions and concerns raised by customers, commissioners, and the council during this challenging time for Norwich Public Utilities. We're committed to improving the areas and where our operations and our governance have fallen short, and we believe these reforms will be an important step forward in reestablishing the trust that has been lost over the past 2.5 years. The first thing that we have worked on is, I'll go over a little topic discussion. We'll discuss the ethics policy, travel policy, human resources, our transparency, financial controls, the bylaws of the board, and then we'll review the settlement agreement. As far as the ethics policy, NPU employees and the board are bound by the City Code of Ethics. The first thing we're doing is initiating ethics training for all our employees above and beyond what the city has already done. This training will be done every 2 years and will include a review of the ordinance, interactive discussions of ethics topics, scenarios and role plays, FAQs, and a read and sign to document the training and make sure everyone is 100% trained and knowledgeable of the ethics policy. In addition to the training, we will send a letter to our vendors twice a year to remind them of our ethics and gift policy. We will also create an ethics hotline for both the employees and the public to report potential issues or to get questions answered. So we want to be as transparent as we can be and responsive to the community and to our employees. As far as travel, we have a draft NPU travel policy that has been developed and is under review by the board and will be further discussed at our next board meeting. This draft policy includes requiring all travel be specifically detailed in the approved budget or reviewed and approved by management if it's something that is not known at the time of the budget process. All meals and incidentals will be paid on a per diem basis, and it's based on government-approved rates. We are also in a final implementation of a software application called Concur that will monitor, track, and reconcile travel expenses. Our policy is written to do this manually until the final implementation is complete. We expect to have that adopted in the next 2 months. As far as other human resource issues that we're dealing with, we will provide an annual staffing strategic presentation to be included as part of the budget process. This is planned in the next budget meeting. We're also looking very closely at the management structure and staffing plan that will include the strategic use of attrition as well as timing and hiring of unfilled positions to be as fiscally responsible as possible. As far as contract negotiations, all NPU labor agreements are valid through June of 2021. When we renegotiate those contracts, we will hire a consultant to analyze market compensation, and we will seek input from the city's human resources and the city manager for guidance and support during these contract negotiations. The City Director of Human Resources also currently has copies of all contracts, MOUs, and all other payroll and HR documentation, and we will ensure that that continues going forward. As far as transparency and freedom of information, NPU has revised our board meeting posting procedures based on recommendations from both the board attorney and the Corporation Counsel. We are making sure we're doing everything correct. We will continue to ensure that all legal requirements relating to the state's freedom of information laws are followed for both regular and special meetings of the NPU Board of Commissioners, the Sewer Authority, executive sessions, public hearings, and media requests. There have been no violations reported related to this issue, but given the importance of enhancing transparency for all NPU activities, a continuous review and confirmation of our compliance is ongoing. Freedom of information training is now required for all new NPU board members and for the leadership team at a minimum of every 5 years. Someone new comes on the team, we'll have the training, and then we'll make sure we're repeating it. We're also developing a 3-year strategic plan covering 2019 to 2022 for a more inclusive, transparent, and focused process, which aligns both the staff, the leadership, and the NPU board. This strategic plan will be made available publicly and posted on the NPU website. This will also be brought up in the meeting in the March Board of Commissioners. NPU is also reviewing its document retention policy and will revise it as necessary. And we are also in the process of posting all of our policies either on the NPU intranet, if it's an internal policy, or on the website, if it's a customer-focused policy, as appropriate. We have many financial controls in place, and we are audited by an independent CPA as part of the city's comprehensive annual financial report that is chosen by the city through an RFP process. We have not had a single adverse opinion in any NPU audit over the past 5 years, and Bloom Shapiro, who does this audit for the city and for the utilities and presented at the last city council meeting, will present their findings at our March board meeting. All NPU projects that include state funding are also subject to audit by the state of Connecticut. These include Clean Water Fund, Drinking Water, State Revolving Fund, and Department of Transportation projects. So there's a large number of our projects that are always get audited by these state agencies. We are also audited by the state of Connecticut's Department of Revenue Services for sales tax and gross receipts tax. And we are audited by the IRS for federal excise tax. In December of 2018, a targeted audit was conducted by the NPU Board Attorney, and this report is currently being drafted for final review. NPU retained a financial consultant to review existing processes, controls, and policies for compliance with GAAP and GASB standards. This consultant will also provide information on best practices for municipal utility companies and recommend process improvements for NPU as appropriate. So those are the improvements that the staff will be doing. As far as the bylaws for the board governance, the last official revision of the board bylaws was completed in 2011. There have been numerous drafts since then, but we plan on making a 2019 revision that will include NPU board chairmanship term limits, confirming that compensation, benefits, and policies are made by a majority vote of the board and not delegated to an individual or other party, forming a business and economic development subcommittee to identify opportunities and report to the full board. We will establishing a finance and accounting subcommittee to review practices will provide a high level or strategic perspective for oversight and compliance, as well as guidance for budget and rate development. And this subcommittee will also provide oversight and support during the annual audit process. The board will also enhance monitoring and management of the NPU consultants and board consultants, and ensure all city procurement processes will be followed, and all professional service contracts with a value of more than $25,000 per year will be subject to a formal RFP process. These are the governance and improvements we're suggesting. The board and staff have been working very hard on these improvements, and we hope to have them all implemented in the spring of this year. Does anyone have any questions regarding those projected improvements?
Yes, not.
Ma'am. Oh,
Okay.
good.
Yeah, we're good for now. Yeah.
All right. I would now like to turn it over to the board attorney, Tony Palomino, to review the John Bilda, or former general manager John Bilda, settlement agreement.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, Mayor Nystrom and members of the Board of Aldermen. Thank you for inviting me here tonight. I'm just going to give you a very quick recap of the settlement agreement, and then I'd like to take questions, because I think that would probably get us to the heart of what you may want to hear about quickly. The basic settlement agreement that we put together has been talked about much in the paper, and it has a dollar figure of $150,000 on that dollar figure. But when you look at that agreement, if you look at the about $115,000 of that $150,000 is money that is payable to all employees of the city of Norwich and the NPU for accumulated vacation, vacation is granted upon retirement, accumulated sick time, special sick leave accrual that allows for a $1,000 addition to pension payment. Some of these are collective bargaining items, some of these are personnel rules and regulations of the city, some of them are part of the merit system. It's a hodgepodge of various things. And there was a significant amount of time that was accumulated both in vacation time and sick time that the former general manager was entitled to, and that amount approximates $115,000. The actual cash compensation that would not have been paid to a retiring employee in this circumstance that we had is $35,000, not $150,000. It's $35,000. And the $115,000 that I talk about is not money that's subject to the Connecticut General Statute's clawback question for like mayors of my town in Hartford, Mayor Perez, who was convicted back in 1999 and is still, to this day, hasn't been adjudicated whether or not he's going to lose his pension. But none of that money, because it's accumulated vacation and sick time, it's provided under city and NPU rules. None of that corresponds to money that's a pension under the retirement system. So none of that money is reach back money. It's all money that's payable under your rules and the NPU rules, which in large respect mirror your rules. Now, the rest of the agreement, of course, contains a settlement agreement, a waiver of right to sue, a waiver of our taking action. It has a non-disparagement agreement. In essence, it has the components of a normal settlement agreement for someone who's the chief executive of your operation. I dare to say that if you had a similar circumstance with your city manager and you put together a settlement agreement of all terms and conditions for the manager, you'd have something similar to ours, but not exactly the same, because hopefully the circumstances would have been a little different. You also have to remember that we could not take any action based upon the CMEC indictment, because under our constitutional rules in the United States and in Connecticut, an individual is perceived innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. An indictment is only a statement made by the prosecuting attorneys that they believe a certain set of facts amount to a criminal act. Whether or not that is a criminal act gets determined by a jury of your peers after a trial in open court. Or, if you choose, it can be a trial to a judge, but I would assume that in a case similar to this, we're going to be looking at a jury trial. And that jury trial is probably not coming anytime soon. In fact, the case right now is stymied because of the recent litigation that was concluded with the former finance director of CMEC, who won the right to have his attorney's fees paid by the CMEC directors and officers policy. I can point out that our directors and officers policy was never called into question in this case, and the board chose not to put a claim in under our policy because the activities that were in the indictment had nothing to do with NPU, had to do with CMEC. So there's nothing in our insurances that correspond to this. So that is a brief update of what we put together. Oh, and by the way, for questioning about whether someone retires in good standing or not in good standing, again, I'm going to refer you to the presumption of innocence. You cannot claim that a person is in bad standing because they've been indicted. That is not acceptable under the United States Constitution, the Constitution of the state of Connecticut, and it could not be a part of what we would put together in a settlement agreement. Notwithstanding, it would probably not have been a settlement agreement if that was something that we tried to include and indicated that you would not be in good standing. But frankly, in good standing, if you read through the parts of the NORAD's rules and regulations on pension and benefits and the NPU policies, the not in good standing would have only affected a couple of small portions of the pension entitlement and not anything of significance. Now, we don't know what the pension is going to be because that's something down the road. But I can tell you that I researched all of these items at the time, and there were some provisions that wouldn't apply if you were not in good standing, but it basically was certain provisions under the collective bargaining agreement that gave you an enhanced pension and enhanced pension entitlement and some enhanced vacation time and other circumstances of the same nature. So, in summary, that is what the agreement does. It's fully executed. It has not been rescinded. There's a $10 payment that's being made in January, February, and March, and into April. Although in April it will only be, it'll be 10 days divided by, it'll be 50 cents a day for the first 10 days. And that's so that the pension time will run to his 55th birthday, and there is no impact on the pension at all by the payment of $50. So I'm happy to take questions now on anything I said and anything I didn't say.
Okay, just before we begin, the intent now is to give each council member an opportunity to ask questions. And so I am asking every member of council to acknowledge that there are others besides even myself who has questions. We'd like to start by going through the entire council, giving each member the right to ask maybe their most important question, if you want to look at it that way. That's the way I've looked at the set of questions I have, because we want everyone to have an opportunity to be heard. It would be very easy if one person started asking questions and just keep going on and on and on. It's easy to happen. We want everyone to have an opportunity. That's my request. So, anyone looking up? Alderman Gould, your hand went up.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for being here tonight. I realize that this has been a very difficult time for the commissioners, for NPU management, and especially the men and women who work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 years at NPU. There is language in the separation agreement that would allow Mr. Bilda to be hired on as a consultant. Is there a scenario in the future that you see that would allow that actually to take place?
Well, let me answer that by telling you that somewhere during late November, early December, I found out that the previous general manager of NPU had a consultant agreement that everyone thought was 1 year for $40,000, that turned out to be a 10-year agreement for $400,000. I wasn't knowledgeable of that until late in November. But number one, this is not that particular situation. This language is designed to allow Mr. Builder to be hired as a consultant by some other employer.
So it's not specific to NPU being hired?
It's not specific to NPU. In fact, when we discussed this, when the attorneys were discussing this, our concern and their concern was that if the person was not going to be employed anymore and their employment was going to end as of the 31st of the year, which in this case it did, except for the carryover, that they would then be out in the market, so to speak. And therefore, once they're out in the market, in this country, they're out in the market. So that's what that has to do with.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's fair to say I can't really speak for the entire board, but we have no intention of hiring him as a consultant. I mean, this is for a third party. This is not a plan of ours at all. You know, we also ended the earlier contract 2 years ago, consulting contract. It's not something we want to do.
Thank you.
Other members like to speak in? Nash?
I just have a quick question. I know there was some reports that the contract that Mr. Builder had was in violation of the city charter. And you had mentioned, Mr. LaRose, that there were several people still under contract till the 2021. Have we ensured that these contracts are in line with our city charter and that we're not going to face another issue like this?
The contracts I'm referring to are our labor contracts for our IBW steelworkers and ASME unions.
Okay, so there's nobody else like under a contract?
There are no other contracts for employment at NPU.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Other members? Yes, Alderman Browning.
You're not here representing CMAC, correct?
No, I'm not.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to go and ask the senior NPU commissioner, who's also a board member of CMAC, this question. Just so that you know exactly what I'm referring to in the agreement, paragraph 6 says, NPUC agrees that its board members who are appointed to serve as board members of the Connecticut Municipal Electric Energy Cooperative Board of Directors shall vote to support any motion or resolution that entitles BILDA to indemnification or advancement of funds in connection with the defense of any claim, civil or criminal, related to BILDA's previous service as a member of the CMAC Board of Directors at the direction of NPUC. My question to Ms. Jones, Dr. Jones, is before signing this agreement, did you, as a board member of CMAC, or Mr. Peel, have a resolution from the CMAC board giving you permission or their agreement to sign this contract permanently binding the votes of 2 members? Or if you did not have the agreement of their board, did you have a written opinion from the CMAC lawyer saying it was okay to sign this agreement?
Let's see if I understand your question. Did we have a written opinion from CMAC
Correct.
to sign this agreement?
Giving you permission to sign this agreement in reference to paragraph 6.
No.
And you didn't have a written opinion from the CMAC attorney, I know they have one on staff, giving you, saying it's okay to sign this permission in absence of a board vote.
When we are with
Okay, that answers that question. Okay, I mean, I have other questions, or I can give the
I'll
floor
get
and give
back to
other
you.
people.
Thank you, Sam. Other members? I haven't had a chance. Yes, Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It's very informative. I have a couple of questions, and I will say that the presentation actually answered 4 of the questions I was going to ask, so thank you very much for that. On the panel for financial controls, it says in December 2018, a targeted audit was conducted by the NPU board attorney. That was out of your office.
Yes.
Targeted in what way?
Targeted, and it was designed to go to governance and financial issues of the operation of NPU.
For how long? How far back?
It went back basically, well, it went back quite a while on those issues. I would say to the, let me just get the exact went back to the first year that the former general manager was employed as general manager. So I would say that's 1990?
No.
19,
It went to,
I want to say 1990.
So was it Mr. Builder's entire tenure as the general manager?
Yes.
And that also included the time that Mr. Sullivan was the chair of the NPU board?
Yes, it did. Although I didn't focus on Mr. Sullivan per se, as opposed to other commissioners.
And would it be fair to say that one of the things that we were looking for was misappropriation of funds?
Well, I would say that when you do a targeted audit on the finances and the governance of an entity for that period of time, yes, you're looking to see whether the expenditure of funds has been appropriate and whether there is anything that causes you to have a concern.
So would it be fair to ask, or fair to say that you're satisfied that we do not have a similar situation to what was discovered in the audit of CMEC, where Mr. Sullivan was reimbursed, however, whatever word you want to use, $66,000 worth of money he was not entitled to?
Yes, yes, sir. My understanding, I studied the subpoenas. There were subpoenas filed in this case about a year and a half ago. And the initial subpoena was involved, asked for any monies that were paid to commissioners, including Commissioner Sullivan. So all the documentation for that was submitted, and as you saw in the indictment, none of it came out in the indictment, nothing regarding NPU. Additionally, at some point halfway through the subpoena process, there became a revelation after a court procedure in which it came to people's knowledge that NPU had paid out a settlement on a claim against Mr. Sullivan for improper conduct with a employee. At that point, the federal government issued a second subpoena, and that subpoena was looking for any items that might have been paid on behalf of Commissioner Sullivan. And that subpoena was responded to in due form by the NPU. All records were turned over, and again, there was nothing found out of line for the payments. So I would say, at least as we sit here today, as far as the FBI is concerned, they had two subpoenas, one more direct than the other, looking for the type of thing you asked about, and had not found anything to create an indictable offense.
So would you recommend to the board, or will the board, yes or no, take up the issue of amending its bylaws so that commissioners are enjoined from having any financial, fiduciary, commercial, or personal interest in any project or development being undertaken by the City of Norwich, the Norwich Community Development Corporation, or Norwich Public Utilities proper, or any of its divisions?
Just a second, sir.
That gets to be a part of bylaws for the board not doing anything to do with settlement agreements.
Yeah.
Those are things under ethics and conflict of interest.
Yeah, I guess I would say that, number one, I've had extensive experience with your ethics policy, and it would be covered under the ethics policy as I understand it. As we sit here today, that's all covered under the ethics policy. I also think that if you read carefully Chapter 12 of the Charter, which sets out the do's and don'ts for how you run the NPU, I think that also covers that particular area. It's certainly something that, now that I've heard it from you, it can be taken into consideration, but that's my initial impression. Those things are covered by ethics, conflict of interest, and the Chapter 12 rules of the Charter, as well as other provisions in the Charter that aren't specifically related to NPU, but that do impact Norwich employees, such as due process rights for senior officials, that sort of thing.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question, but I will yield the floor to give everybody a chance to ask their questions, if we may return to my last question after
Certainly.
everybody has had a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other member like to? Yes, please, Alderman Burnham.
So thank you all so much for coming. I think this was a really fantastic presentation, and it does go a long way to address a number of our concerns. I think that there's a larger issue, a systemic cultural issue. We talk about ethics. And we're focused very much on the settlement agreement today and the Kentucky Derby and things that have stemmed from that. But over the last year, we've had a lot of reports about circumventing labor, sexual harassment, and there seems to be a cultural systemic issue in leadership and those of power. So I think that that needs to be considered as you examine everything, not just in relation to this, because I think I personally haven't heard much contrition from those responsible who are accountable to the ratepayers. Thank you, Mr. LaRose, for acknowledging that tonight to earn back the public trust. I think we haven't heard enough about, we are really sorry that the ratepayers were put in this position. We have to do better to keep them at the forefront of all of our decisions while representing the best interests of the commission. So I guess, well, of the utility. So my question would be, with hindsight being 2020, learning everything that we've learned, what would you have done differently?
Can I say something?
Sure.
I don't know what you're talking about as far as any link with us in previous, sexual incidents that occurred or any financial allegations that occurred. Because none of us were involved in any of that. Chris LaRose was asked to go to the Kentucky Derby. He said he'd been in touch with the 10-foot pole, I think is what I heard he said, or something of that nature. The people around this table had nothing to do with this problem. We've dedicated months of our time to getting this resolved and cleaning up, if you want to call it this, cleaning up, and trying to be fair but firm. We said a lot of no's in these negotiations, a lot more than people realize, obviously. It was pretty tough. We were pretty tough. They had the advantage of one side of the contract. We had the advantage of the circumstances under which this occurred, took full advantage of it. I think we got a really fair deal with the city. When you consider that we rescinded his $18,000 bonus, that would have added to his pensionable earnings, and it would have cost, a sizable amount of money 20 years down the road in pension benefits. So, we gave him 35, and we had to give him something, because when you retire an executive, as our attorney advised us, there has to be some quid pro quo, and but we took away, quite a bit too, and I know there's the issue that Councilman Bryan brought up on the indemnification by CMED. But we felt, we took our attorney's advice that really, to get the deal done, was worth, not arguing something that we couldn't win.
Thank you, and I acknowledge that, and I think the negotiation's done, and that's honestly not where my focus is. I think you did the best for the most part. We have some disagreements about that.
I'd also like to say that the people at NPU are pretty beat up over this too. Norwich is an oasis when there's an outage in the state, and that's just because these people risk their lives going up on telephone poles and cutting down trees. And it'd be nice if they got a little credit, instead of they feel like they're just getting pummeled all the time.
So,
The best job in the country, because I'm serious.
no, I.
Go to the APPA conferences, we're regarded as one of the top 1% of all the public utilities in the country.
All right, so thank you, and I think everybody acknowledges that. We've said that time and time again from this dais, and that's where my distinction is. The people who do the work every day, we have the best service. We have it's one of the biggest assets in Connecticut, and it is enviable. And don't get me wrong, I'm thankful, and I tout the service that we get. But I think there is a distinction between administration and those in power and those responsible for making those decisions. And yes, the people on the line having to bear the burden of the decisions made by people in power, and they have to then defend those decisions. even though it's not their role, and they shouldn't have to. And in terms of responsibility, I understand that not everybody sitting here was on the board or was there to be able to prevent some of these things from happening. But ultimately, the buck stops with those in power. I mean, something comes before me from a decision that was made 5 years ago, but now it impacts something down the road. I can't say, hey, that was them. It's my responsibility, just like it is yours. And I think, again, the men and women every day doing the work, it's unparalleled. But always remembering that the ratepayer and those that we're responsible for are our North Star, and we need to think and make decisions that way. And I think a lot of the things today have gone a long way to do that.
If I could just add something.
The contracts that we were faced with, they go back to the 80s, and from the man prior to John Bill. This was more or less a continuation of John, when it was his predecessor. So it goes, it wasn't a bad situation, but it was just the culture of the time.
Yeah.
Now it's all different.
Yeah, if I could just add something. I mean, I understand your concern about expressing contrition, and from an institutional perspective, I think we all owe ratepayers and the taxpayers contrition, both on the City Council and on the Board of Commissioners and Public Utilities. But the fact of the matter is, there have been 2 incidents that you referred to. The first was a sexual harassment case. That was a case involving former Chairman Jim Sullivan. 3 of us have been on the Board of Commissioners for 2 years or less. A 4th member replaced Jim Sullivan on the board. That did not occur under our watch. We did schedule the first sexual harassment training session ever held for commissioners to try to deal with that subject. So it is something we've tried to respond to, but, as much as we can feel for the ratepayers and the taxpayers, it's hard for us to take complete responsibility for things we were not here to do. The other thing was the labor dispute that occurred 6 months ago, maybe, when John Bilda changed the job responsibilities of one of the employees and gave him a raise and so forth and so on, and the union filed a grievance. That's been reversed. Chris reversed it. It is settled. The union is happy. The employees are happy. So, again, I think we all have an ongoing responsibility to the taxpayers and to the ratepayers, but we also have to remember that people who are really responsible are not on this board.
Alderwoman Filbert, please.
Thank you for being here tonight. I don't have a question as much as I would like to make a couple of comments. I look at today as a sad and a glorious day for the City of Norwich and NPU. A sad day because we find ourselves in this position, and a glorious day that going forward, we will put this behind us and we will recover it. The trust of the citizens of Norwich. All of you, in truth, were not responsible or culpable for what happened prior to your positions on the board. I have many comments that I would like to make about former members, but I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to do so. I'll keep those close to, share those with close friends and acquaintances. We have a long way to go to regain the trust of the ratepayers. Things happened that shouldn't have happened. The phrase "good old boy" keeps coming to my mind. I will say in the time that the former gentleman was acting city manager here, I had great concerns in conversations that I had with him. And I think that's something that we might have to address at another time. But I think the most important thing is that we learn from this experience, and going forward, we make sure that these sweetheart deals are no longer allowed, that every contract, regardless of its NPU or within the city, is gone over with a fine-tooth comb, and the information is readily available for those people, those individuals, us, the taxpayers, the ratepayers, the people that foot the bill, have information. I don't understand how any corporation in the private or public sector would allow an employee to accrue that much vacation and sick time. I hope that going forward in your policies and procedures that you will have cutoffs. It's kind of, when I look at it, it's mind-blowing, mind-blowing. But I also understand that we are in a situation where your decisions and your settlement is probably the lesser of two evils. What we are obligated to compensate Mr. Bilder for could have been much, much worse. So I applaud you for doing what you had to do, and going forward, I'm sure you understand that all your actions for the not too distant future will be examined under a microscope by the public. So I wouldn't want to be in your seat. I wish you all well, and it's time to put this thing to bed and move on. NPU has always had a stellar reputation, excellent service. I complain every time I see Mr. LaRose about how much I have to pay, but as I say to him, my lights are on, my toilet flushes, and the water comes out of the faucet. And that's what we pay for. So if you don't want to pay for that, get yourself an outhouse, a well, or whatever, but everything has a cost. And let's use this unfortunate experience as a learning experience and move on. Thank you.
Just my one question is, and Alderman Philbrick just alluded to it, but there clearly has been a financial gain for the ratepayers going forward, and the fact that pensionable earnings are now effectively closed, involving the former general manager. Could you address that a little bit, please?
Yes. One of the directives that was provided to me when I was negotiating the agreement was that we were going to attempt to cut off the expenditure of pensionable earnings by the end of the year 2018, which we did do. I want to, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, let me indulge me for a second. I want to read you a section of the agreement. This is what we would have been looking at had we not reached an agreement regarding pensionable earnings. In the event the board, meaning NPU, terminates the general manager for just cause, the manager is entitled to a lump sum payment equal to the amount of compensation and benefits accrued and payable as of the effective date of the termination. Therefore, had we gone to arbitration, and let's say we started the arbitration process in December, we'd probably be arbitrating this case sometime in May or June, and let's say a decision was issued in September. If the ruling supported a just cause termination, under this language, payment would be made from December all the way through the date of the arbitration award in favor of the NPU. That would be a phenomenal amount of money. That would all be pensionable earnings. It would be over $200,000 pensionable earnings probably, or in that ballpark, just for any employee who was in it. So I've represented labor clients on behalf of management, mostly public sector. I started here in Norwich, Norwich Board of Education, City of Norwich, the London Board, Groton Town, 1976. I've never seen a clause like this in my entire 45 years of being a lawyer. You get paid right up until the date that you're found to be terminated. Usually it's just the opposite. If you're terminated, like I terminated someone for drinking on the job one time. Well, all during the termination process, that person was out working unpaid. He didn't get the money back. Here, you got paid, even if you were found guilty. So we saved a significant amount of pensionable earnings. Also, the $18,000 $500 payment that would have been made in late November of 2018. Had that payment been made, it would have recurred in 19 and 2020. So you were talking about $55,000. That all would have impacted pensionable earnings. None of that will impact pensionable earnings anymore. No, none of that was paid. That payment never issued in November, and none of those amounts were paid. So the only thing that impacts pensionable earnings now is $10, $20, $40. Whatever 8.5% is of $40, that's the pensionable earnings impact. So that's a significant savings. There were some issues regarding payments that were made over the course of his career that tended to bump up the base salary, but those things were signed off on by former Chairman Sullivan and created some impact on pension, but clearly the impacts that we've avoided are over close to $250,000 worth of impact has been avoided. So I consider that to be another plus, and we have a final plus that we also canceled another benefit policy that existed that would have run for another 10 years, and that's a savings to the NPU of $150,000. So if you add all those savings up, you're talking about when we shut the situation down at the end of December of this year, and we paid out the $35,000 plus the $115,000, which your rules and regulations pay out. Any employee of the town of the city of Norwich who retires is going to get some form of vacation and sick leave payout. And depending on how high their position is, it's going to be a higher amount. So if you figure that we paid basically $35,000 in extra money, and we saved back approximately over $250,000 in salary and pensionable impacted earnings, plus $150,000 in a benefit that we no longer have to pay, that's some pretty significant savings. So, good old Steve always mentions the lawyer fees for arbitration. The lawyer fees for arbitration would have been, in a case like this, it would have been significant. But no more significant than getting paid right up until the date, even if the NPU were to win the case. We'd be paying right up until that very date. That's just, when you add all of those monies up, you're coming in around about $400,000 that came off the table. And $35,000 went on the table. I think that's a pretty good deal.
Thank you. Members? Yes, Alderman Browning.
Thank you. And once again, this is a CMAQ-oriented question because we have two board members here. This decision to sign the agreement was made on January 22nd, 2019, or the final decision. And this, I don't think that there's any disagreement with me that this was prior to CMAQ making a final decision on indemnifying everyone, including John. I see a nod from Mr. Peel. And also that CMAQ had not finished its investigation, correct? Okay. And also, the interests of Norwich Public Utilities is not identical with the interests of CMAQ because we do not own a majority of CMAQ. We own 20 to 25%. Yeah, we all agree on that. So my concern is the following. You take a look at the contract, and you take a look at 6, and it says that NPU agrees that its board members who are appointed shall vote to support any motion or resolution that entitles BILDA to indemnification or advancement of funds in connection with the defense of any claim, criminal, civil, or criminal. And my concern is, to the two board members, you have a fiduciary responsibility to CMAQ, your board members. And you have just signed a document which has bound their hands in terms of their litigation with Mr. Bilda, which in turn indirectly affects their negotiations with other board members. And my question to you is, isn't that a conflict of interest? Because you've just agreed to an agreement which benefits the NPU board, but it does not benefit the CMAQ board. And I'm asking you, not as NPU members, I'm asking you as CMAQ board members. No, I'm asking a question.
There wouldn't be a vote to indemnify. Indemnification is in the bylaws. You would only vote if you choose to take away indemnification. So the exact language of the agreement says that you will vote to support anything that provides indemnification. We already had indemnification.
But it's, at the same time, it puts in here that I mean, if it was unnecessary, why did it end up in the contract? Because obviously someone pushed for this language to go in, and that was obviously a negotiating deal point.
Let's take it from the standpoint of D&O operates at NPU also, but that's a CMAQ issue. The whole case is a CMAQ issue. And so if there is indemnification needed, it will be there. But I want you to hear this, and that is, I will always act and make my decisions in behalf of NPU and the best interest for the ratepayers and taxpayers.
Well, you very well may, and this is a deal which benefits NPU, but on the other hand, CMAQ sorting through, which we own a portion of, so we have some degree of obligation to. And granted, for those who haven't taken Corporation 101, this may seem somewhat complex, but there's going to be a lot of litigation on the CMAQ line, and we may end up being, John may end up being indemnified for years to come. I mean, we just can't predict it. So why was it necessary to agree to a provision in this contract which ties CMAQ's hands when you could have just simply said to John, you can rely on the language that's in the CMAQ contract already. You're on your own. Why put CMAQ at a disadvantage by agreeing to number 6?
I think that our attorney who's helped did more than just help in the negotiating process.
But he's not the attorney for, you're not the attorney for CMAQ, though.
No, I'm not the attorney for CMAQ.
You have different interests.
Pardon me?
NPU has different interests than CMAQ.
I do, but I can read a D&O policy, and I also can read the statutes, and I can read the CMAQ bylaws. And the CMAQ bylaws, even before we signed this agreement, their initial bylaws provided for advance payments, which means the payments are made by the insurance company at the time. Once the litigation started and the feds came in to investigate the CMAQ, advance payments were made under the CMAQ policy. They then executed a bylaw change in sometime in October, where they tried to dial that back. And of course, what happened was all the attorneys for the 5 defendants went to federal court and claimed in the pretrial operation that they couldn't represent their clients because they were being denied payments, even though the CMAQ bylaw at the time the case commenced called for advance payments. So CMAQ's position was in serious doubt right at the beginning. Subsequent to that, CMAQ's former finance director retired and moved out of state. He hired counsel in the New Haven area who brought an action against CMAQ, claiming he was entitled to being paid advance payments under the original CMAQ bylaw. That decision had just issued by the United States District Court judge, who not only heard that...
But not on January 22nd when this was signed.
That's right. But he issued that decision, and he issued that decision even though he's handling the entire criminal case. So as far as I was concerned, there was a poor opportunity for CMAQ to be prevailing on what they were talking about in the first place. The provision that we have in this thing only talked to us about paying in accordance with the bylaws. And if you read the CMAQ bylaws, the only change in the October change, it wasn't that they weren't going to indemnify, it's that they weren't going to make advance payments. So that became sort of a moot point.
But no, it's actually, technically, it's not moot because the language here, first of all, it's not number 6 is not identical to what's in the CMAQ bylaws, correct?
No, it's not.
Okay, and second of all, it's a it's a binding agreement that you will always support indemnification without any, I mean, let me give you a hypothetical. I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen with John Bilda's case. Let's say he gets convicted, he gets fined.
Let's talk about someone else.
But the point being, non-disparagement agreement. Let's say hypothetically.
No, let's not talk about someone who
But-
has an active case. Let's
But,
talk hypothetical.
okay, hypothetically, you signed this agreement was to your benefit, you signed it, you were found guilty in a federal court, and what then happened was that you got fined $100,000. You lost that appeal, you're stuck with it, but at the same time, you can go back because you are always guaranteed 2 votes. You can go back and get compensation from the CMAQ board because of the document which binds the
I
votes.
don't think that's true, because I think the CMAQ directors and operators insurance, officers insurance clause, when they hand out the paper for you to sign as a person who's going to be indemnified, one of the things in that contract is that if you are convicted, you have to pay the money back.
But it doesn't put that, it doesn't have language in here saying,
But it doesn't
but per,
matter, because
I disagree with you,
That's between me and CMAQ.
but there's not an option, there's not a clause in here which gives you that out.
You wouldn't put a clause in there.
No, you would.
Bind CMAQ, and you can't bind.
You would, this is bindings, the people we send up to the CMAQ board to vote on NPU's behalf, and there's not an option there out. I mean, we disagree, but I can tell you this much. If I had a choice, and I will finish with this statement, if I had a choice between which legal side to take, between a certain hypothetical person and the CMAQ board facing this, that certain hypothetical person would be at an advantage.
I think the language in our agreement required the CMAQ members of the NPU board to vote in accordance with the CMAQ bylaws.
Well, this is not identical with their rules.
But that's what the bylaws, just read the bylaws.
I'd be very surprised if the vote ever came up that required us to vote.
You have to read the
What
bylaws.
that settlement says, as I said, indemnification is provided by the bylaws, not the vote.
That's right.
If the person was being asked to not be
Alderman Nash.
I just have a quick, again, I too want to thank you all for being here. And one of my questions I have is, since we're playing hypotheticals, my question is this, and I really wanted to have the people that are watching, people that are here, understand how we got to this point, because it's a little frustrating for me. And Alderman Browning did bring up some of the points that I have with the indemnification and paying for attorneys and stuff like that. And you say how much money we're saving by doing all this fancy bookwork stuff, and look how much we saved. But in the end, someone's going to pay Mr. Bilda's attorney fees, which could amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. So that's my first question I want to say is, I'm a policeman. I get arrested by my police department or state police for bribery, for extortion, for something. I can guarantee my police department's not going to put me on administrative paid leave and is not going to pay my law fees until I'm found guilty or not guilty. How the heck did we get here with this contract where we're paying a gentleman who was indicted, okay, for a crime? He may or may not have convicted, maybe not have committed. However, we're going to pay all these legal fees and indemnify him and give him his pension and give him all his pay while he was away. And that would not happen anybody in this room. I want to know, to the people who are watching and here that want to know how we got here. Now, you kind of touched on it a little bit with all the talk, but I just need to know brass tacks. How do we get to where we're covering him, not just his pension, his pay while he was suspended or on leave or whatever the heck you guys called it, and now he's going to get law fees? I hate to be so crass, but it really aggravates.
There's an easy answer.
Thank you.
The initial contract that was put together for the previous general manager was such a giveaway contract that he handed it away. It was handed away by the people who negotiated that contract. Now, I have a good idea who some of the commissioners were back in that day, only because I was politically active back in the early 70s. As Peter would know, we served together in the legislature for 3 terms. So I know who some of those people were, but it was people on the board. And they did it. They put together a contract that I've never seen in my 45 years of practice. That's how you got there. It's as simple as that. And the terms of that contract were never adjusted.
And there was no way we could have fought that.
Well, there was a way you could have fought it. Anytime you wanted, you could have renegotiated the contract. But you could have fought it. We could have fought it right now, except we'd be sitting around talking about when the arbitration is going to take place, and the salary would just keep being paid. Sure, we could have fought it. They're doing $250,000.
Well, it's going to be that much after law fees anyway, so it's-
Well, even before the law.
That contract was signed 13 years ago. It was renewed 5 years later, and it was renewed 5 years later again. I mean, it's not as though this was something that was done yesterday and we can appeal it. It was a long-standing agreement that was irresponsibly approved time after time after time. When I went on the board, we talked, 2 years ago, we specifically talked about how the contract was violated the city charter, how it had to be changed. Anyone who read the contract's mouth would fall open. It's not sort of, 60-40 in favor of one party. It is the most unbalanced contract I've ever seen. But it had 2 more years to run. You're not going to just stop, break contract. We were prepared to renegotiate that contract in 2 years, I guess 2020, I guess it would be, when it was up. And we would have brought it into compliance with the charter, and we would have made the terms more palatable and even-handed. But, sometimes, I draw the old analogy of the guy with the broom and the shovel following the elephants in the parade. I mean, we didn't have much that we could do.
Yes, Alderwoman Gould.
Okay, so this is almost a perfect segue to my question. Considering the fact that the previous general manager, and Mr. LaRose, please take no offense at this, that the previous general manager's employment contract with the city was crafted heavily in favor of the general manager and provided little or no recourse to NPU in the city of Norwich. What will the next group of commissioners, this group of commissioners, be doing or have already done as far as the acting general manager's contract and a future general manager's contract that is not only fair to both parties, but aligns itself with our charter, which is in Chapter 12, Section 32, that says that the board may appoint a general manager who shall be responsible to the board and shall serve at the pleasure of the board. Similarly, the contract that we have with Mr. Salamone, who runs the city of Norwich, but he is also serving at the pleasure of the board, and I think has a very fair and balanced contract. So could you enlighten us a little bit without...
I would like to speak to that. And Alderwoman Gould, the reason I wanted to take a moment with that is, as we were needing to change leadership, it became very clear that the assistant associate general manager would be the person to step in as the void was being made by the general manager going away. We did one meeting where we announced the appointment, and then we prepared for a second meeting to talk about what were the terms of that appointment. And as we prepared for that next meeting, the acting general manager said, I want to stay just where I am in terms of salary. Indeed, he had to get out of the union, and the union agreed to that. And he's on leave from the union, so to speak. But he said, I want to stay with my salary at this time. And I've forgotten the rules. Is it for 6 months or so?
6 months.
That it remains that way. Because one of the things he felt strongly about, and I must tell you, I felt strongly in the opposite direction, and that was he did not want to cast any more shadows. I'm saying it in my words, he has the right to speak for himself. Any more shadows on the workings of NPU at this time. My thought is when you ask a person to step up and do the head job, and the only position that's outside the union, then you have to compensate in some way. Well, he was drawing his own figures and circles, and we finally accepted that.
Stacy, the answer try to answer your question. I'm sorry. To answer your question from before, I asked Tony to come up with a pro forma contract that's in compliance with the charter. He said he would, as I recall. And it's got to stay within those parameters and don't have this problem.
I was going to add the same thing, Michael stole my thunder. Be sure that the contract that we put together will conform to the charter and be responsive to all of the actions that we've just had.
Well, one of the other considerations, I think, is that in the past, and I'm not saying this about Grace, but I'm saying this about some of the former chairmen. There was this imperial chairman and general manager who basically ran Norwich Public Utilities, and there were 4 passive commissioners. Toward the end, the commissioners authorized Jim Sullivan, for example, to negotiate a new contract or to negotiate pay increases with the general manager. And instead of merely negotiating them, he approved them. And the board rolled over and said, well, they didn't even say okay. They never checked back as far as we can tell. What we're going to do in our bylaws and elsewhere is make sure that everything has to be approved by the entire board. You can't pass off responsibility to one person. You can't let this duopoly of control develop, where it's just the chairman and the general manager. And, you know, part of that is rules and regulations, but part of it is people, too. I mean, I've had people at NPU, staff people and others say that in the past, 4 of the board members would not even open their packets and wouldn't say anything. We ask questions all of the time. I think of myself as a little Alderman Filbert. I say all sorts of things, and so does everyone else. We believe in speaking our mind, and we believe we're part of the decision-making process. We're not there to decorate the room.
Right, well, and I understand that the commissioners that now presently sit on the board are cleaning up a mess that was sort of, for lack of better words, was dumped in their lap. I understand that completely.
Alderman DeLucia.
So I'd like to circle back around to the targeted analysis that you did. Was part of that targeted analysis, did it include the time when the former general manager was also the acting city manager? And I'm specifically interested in, was there any, if so, was there any evidence that where checks and balances should have occurred, you had one person signing contracts on both behalf of the utility and on the behalf of the city of Norwich?
I can't say that I recall exactly when he served in both capacities, but I did go through the time period that would have covered that. And I didn't find any instances where he was executing, well, there was no evidence in the materials I looked at NPU regarding any transactions for the city of Norwich. So I came up with nothing on that regard. I didn't come across any indication that he was executing those agreements as well. My understanding was while he was in that position, I think it was Chris, was taking over control of NPU, in essence, while John was serving in the city.
Yeah, that was in 2015, and I was running the operations at Norwich Public Utilities, but John was still doing dual roles as the head of both organizations.
So then specifically the solar field contracts, right? The solar field we put in the industrial park, the solar field we put on Rogers Road, those contracts and the negotiations for those contracts were not held in the house of one person, so to speak, where, again, the former general manager was overseeing that from a utility standpoint and from a city standpoint.
There were 3 agreements for the solar fields. One agreement was a purchase power agreement through CMEC, of which NPU did not have any work on. The board members of CMEC did work on those agreements through Rankin. There was a city lease agreement for the property, of which Norwich Public Utilities had no say in. The city manager, and I'm assuming the city council, had reviewed those agreements. And then the last agreement was an interconnection agreement that we provide for any solar attacher or anybody who has a generator on our system. And that was something which does not have any financial implications. It only has a protective relay implication for the safety of our linemen and our crews, and to make sure that it doesn't cause any disruptions or outages in our system.
So then, would it be fair to say that in your role at the utility at the time, there was dual oversight?
In my role, I was only involved in the interconnection agreement. CMEC, purchase power, city, leased land.
So there was separation of powers, so to speak?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member of council like to join in further, who hasn't had a second opportunity? I'll have another question then. You pointed out about the cost savings, the cost avoidance, as pensionable earnings have been cut off. And you spoke a little bit about the fact that all of them have now signed an agreement requiring repayment of attorney's fees.
Apparently that was signed at the time the investigation commenced. The FBI investigation, signed with CMEC.
And that did not involve anyone on a local board? Okay.
No, no.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Alderwoman Gould?
All right. The contract, the separation agreement is signed. I want to talk about a little bit on the future of NPU, or ask a question about a little bit of the future of NPU. In order for NPU to grow its revenues, in recent years there's been an outsourcing of our resources to our neighboring towns, especially water to Basra, Lisbon, Montville, Sprague, and I know that there are future plans for gas expansion. What are the major considerations for the expansion of these resources? I realize that Norwich only has so much land available to build. There's only so many people coming to Norwich. We have an older housing stock. But we're taking our utilities outside of our borders. Trying to see, the commissioners, I don't know how heavily involved you are in saying, well, yes, we should do that project, no, we shouldn't do that project, maybe we'll do that project. Will it be necessary at some point in time for NPU to develop some sort of strategy that would incentivize larger scale projects to build within our borders, so that we don't have to send our utilities outside of our borders, so that not only are we getting the utilities revenue for the city, but we're also getting tax dollars for the city? Maybe by creating something similar to one of our enterprise zones, or something of that fashion. So I was just wondering if there are discussions somewhere about the fact that our utilities are having to go outside of our borders, and can we incentivize people to come into our borders, looking at maybe our older mills or housing stock and doing something new with them, and keeping the tax dollars here in Norwich as well as the revenue from the sale of water, electricity, gas.
I'd like to address that if I could. I happen to be in the commercial real estate business and have about 38 years in the construction business, and I do for a living creating economic opportunities. And the city of Norwich is an extremely difficult place to try to create economic opportunities because we have no land to market. And a perfect example of that is the Optimus Healthcare facility that is out in Basra, because Norwich did not have a significant piece of land with utilities available. Basra didn't have them, and an opportunity was created to build the Optimus Healthcare facility, and an agreement was made to bring utilities out there. We need in this city available land for people like me to create opportunities in the city of Norwich, because there are none now. If someone came to me today and wanted to build a 20,000 square foot widget factory with water and sewer and gas, there are little or no opportunities to do that. So we on the board have discussed our opportunity to create financial opportunities to find land in Norwich and try to create spaces for new companies. We recognize in our Business and Economic Committee that we will need to do this, and that's one of the subcommittees that we're very focused on. Our revenue stream is going down. We understand that. We, the commissioners, the 5 of us, understand we need to create opportunities to change the curve. We need to go up. We are looking into that. That's part of what you saw here. We look forward to that opportunity.
Stacy, we had, last week we had a rate setting workshop about how you set rates and your costs and whatnot. A lot of it's kind of over the head.
You'll catch on.
Yeah, I'm young. I'm only 72. We're learning. But, you know, I was asking some of the same questions you asked, to be honest with you. Those are good questions. I mean, I was wondering, gee, you know, we're giving water and sewer to Basra and I think Sprague, sending a line up there, and they're paying the same as Norwich residents, but, you know, we may have to have some bonding expenses for the sewer upgrades and whatnot. You know, we're kind of giving them a free ride in my mind, you know, the way I'm initially looking at, not a free ride, but kind of a discount ride. And then the expert, and I think Chris can back me up on this, made this diagram on the wall where there was 3 circles. One was Norwich and one was 2 others from the other towns. They put in all their infrastructure, all their piping and everything. So we were actually getting the full price, and they had to build the infrastructure. So actually, we got the deal after you explained it that way. Am I right on that, Chris?
Absolutely, yes.
So it was a tremendous economic opportunity for us. You know, at first blush, you wonder, but when you figure out, you get all this extra business, you don't have to spend the time on the infrastructure, that's a home run.
We're constantly creating that opportunity with expanding the lines into Sprague and into Franklin. It's good business for us. It's an opportunity to sell our product.
Yeah, and the Sprague line is one where there is not going to be water and economic development off of that. That is allowing us $5 million of reduction of costs on the other projects we need for our infrastructure. We're also limited to what we can sell in other towns. Our franchise area for electric is the city of Norwich. If we're talking about gas, it's Norwich and Preston. And then when we talk water and sewer, it's the surrounding communities. But the water and sewer are the costliest of the bunch and where you get the least revenue back. Mm-hmm. If we can get participation, assistance through our legislators, because we're regional, it brings a lot of value in addition to the 10% on a water bill that comes from out of town, that goes to the city.
Thank you.
Maybe just one other quick thing.
Sure.
We're in the process of redoing our strategic plan. Much to my surprise, our strategic plans in the past were always classified as draft because then they didn't have to be made public. I didn't understand that at first, but that apparently was the case. This strategic plan is going to be far more entrepreneurially oriented. We're going to be looking to foster growth, and it's going to be public. So I think that will be out in a couple months, 3 months, something like that. I think it's something you'll find encouraging.
Thank you.
Stacy, all set?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much.
All right, just, has everyone had a chance at 2? I'm keeping count, but anyone not? Okay, go ahead, Alderman Joe DeLucia.
So, Mr. Becker, I've heard you make that argument before, you know, that we had a conversation about that. And I'm afraid that we're not going to agree on your portrayal of how that should come together. And I'm happy to hear that Alderman Gould feels similar to the way that I do, that the utility should be helping us focus on Norwich first. And I would say that if somebody came to you or popped up on the radar that wanted a 20,000 square foot widget factory, the first words out of anybody's mouth should be, let's look at the Capehart site. Because, my biggest challenge with the way that you just portrayed that example is this. You may be responsible to the ratepayers system-wide, but you are owned by the taxpayers of the city of Norwich, and they should come first. So if it meant that we need to dovetail the utility with the city council's ability to bond and the state's ability to help us remediate a site, to get a 20,000 square foot piece of development in Greenville instead of in Sprague, then that's what the utility should be focused on first. And until we change that mindset, we will slowly but surely lose more and more of our tax base for the benefit of increasing our utility revenues. Well, the city only gets 10% of those revenues. I'd rather have the tax on the real estate, on an improved property, the personal property tax, the jobs in the boundaries of the city of Norwich, not just outside of our boundaries, because it works for the utility.
Can I address that?
Absolutely.
I couldn't disagree with you more. And being a real estate professional, when people come to people like me looking for that widget factory site, and I suggest to them the Capehart site, for instance, that you would say, the first thing that they would say to me is, what's the cleanup cost? So without funds in place, without the ability to know what the cleanup cost is, the site is untenable. They go away. They run away fast. Development, and I'll give you a good example. I did the Starbucks building in Norwich many years ago, and it was a question as to where to put Starbucks. They didn't want to come here. Well, I was fortunate enough to help convince the developer to bring Starbucks to Norwich because we had the water and the sewer and the gas in front of those two old houses that were there. We reached an agreement with the people, knocked the two houses down, and tied in the water, sewer, and gas. We just did the same exact thing with the doctors, the dentist down the street. They were burnt out in the Christmas fire 2 years ago, wanted to leave Norwich. We convinced them to stay in Norwich because of all the good things that are here, particularly the water, sewer, and the gas that was right in the front of their building. So without viable property for people like me or others to sell, you don't have the opportunity to create the widget factory here.
Can I add one more thing as well?
NCDC is supposed to be, doing what you said about the opportunity to Norwich, and I don't see why we wouldn't work with NCDC if we could. I mean, Chris, you're there every day, but wouldn't we also support them coming to Norwich in any way we could?
Absolutely, and we have, for a developer in Norwich, we typically have the utilities there. We are doing everything we can to get the utilities as cheaply as we can in Norwich. If we expand outside the city, then the developer's paying all of the costs of those expansions. And if you look at our strategic plan, it probably in the past only said the ratepayers of the city of Norwich. We have added throughout that plan taxpayers. We are looking very closely at both the taxpayers and the ratepayers, trying to balance and do the best we can to maximize taxing in the city of Norwich, the taxes, and growing the grand list, as well as just growing revenue for the utility. But we have to be, we have to be prepared to go to a Byron Brook customer if they come along to a large customer. But likewise, it doesn't make sense not to be prepared to go to the Preston Riverwalk and be ready to support that, which could bring in a significant amount of revenue for the city of Norwich. Maybe not the ideal, but Preston Riverwalk is not going to happen in the city of Norwich.
I mean, we're talking about orders of magnitude that would not happen in the city of Norwich when you talk about Preston Riverwalk, but that's different than a 20,000 square foot widget factory. And not to extend the debate, because I didn't want to turn this into an argument, but maybe you're not aware that one of the things that we face, one of the things that our city planner brings to us, is that you have to have, in order to to be in certain programs. Let me back up by saying in certain programs with the state of Connecticut, you have to have a development project in the hopper, or at least the potential for a project before you'll be considered for the remediation money, because the city can't just say, well, we want the state to clean up the property and then we'll figure out what we're going to do with it. They don't do that anymore. Okay, so if we were working together to say, all right, we have a real estate agent that's got a potential developer. The utility can come in at to this extent. The city can come in to this extent. We can then petition the state for cleanup money, and then we can get a project going. But if the default is to, well, let's just go just over the line because we can hook you up to the utilities and you can be on a virgin piece of property, what developer wouldn't choose that option?
Well, that's not the preferred document, and we meet weekly at a city coordination meeting with NCDC, city planning, and NPU officials to closely coordinate and make it as easy as possible to serve any customer in the city of Norwich. That is always our first priority.
And so I guess what Alderwoman Gould was getting at, and this is my point as well, is that we have to make it more attractive for companies and developers to do that in the city of Norwich, so that not only do we get the benefit of the utility revenue, but we get the grand list growth as well.
But you're missing the big point. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to make it more attractive. We need to make more business. You tell me where we're going to put them. When that guy calls me tomorrow and wants to build a 10,000-foot auto store, where am I going to put him? The business park is full. We just sold the building to the explosives company that may want to expand this into the 16 acres in Franklin in the future. We don't have any buildable land of consequence left in Norwich. That's a big problem.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to monopolize the remaining time. I appreciate your comments. I believe on certain points we agree, and on several points we won't.
Alderman Browning.
So how much would it cost to run a sewer and water out to the Byron Brook property, which is the one remaining piece of property I'm aware of which you could develop? Granted, there's some wetland there, but I'm just saying that if that was a concern, at least it's, most of it, except for the stuff under the barn and the chicken coop and the house, is undeveloped.
Yeah, we have I don't have those numbers handy with me. I wasn't prepared to talk to that. But we have construction estimates for water, sewer, gas, and electric get down there. And if a major developer comes in and wants to be there, we will make sure we are there ahead of that developer.
With that said, you need a road, too. Now, I know the city is prepared to build one, but there's no direct connection to Byron Brook at this point.
That's true. It would require, I know, and I know the Department of Transportation doesn't want to build an exit, but that's what government is for, and asking another bigger government, state government, to do it with a little bit of, with some money coming from us, you could do it. I'm not saying it would be easy, but, that's a solvable problem as versus a problem that cannot be dealt with.
Sam, what you're missing out on is, it's a great opportunity, maybe, but right now, who controls it? The owners.
Obviously.
So anybody from anywhere could show up tomorrow and say they want to build something, and there has been activity on that property all along the lines of what Bob just said and Peter alluded to. I mean, there's an opportunity that the city of Norwich should look to develop. I agree with you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it sounds like we need another workshop.
Happy to abide by that.
And that's about this whole thing on economic development. I know we have many branches, but you can also hear the amount of interest we have, too. And I think that's separate and distinct from what we're doing tonight. But part of our work that the commissioners are doing is looking to the future. And so maybe this is another time to sit down and have another workshop to see where we can go. I have a house. It's not enough land. But it's the kind of thing that we think about around the city. And I like the discussion, but I think it's another discussion other than tonight. If I may say that.
Happy to set that up with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Just like to thank you all for being here and for the exchange of information. I think that's always helpful. And let's get working together more and more, because it would only make us stronger. Thank you all.
Oh.